Ladies and gentlemen, members of the City Council, please attend the call meeting of the City Council to be held in the 6th floor conference room, 801 Crawford Street, 5 p.m., Tuesday, January 13, 2015, for the purpose of a public work session. In addition, you may consider a motion to go into closed meeting by order of the mayor. Mr. Cherry?
Excuse me.
I'm sorry.
Is the mayor?
He's not going to get here until 6 p.m.
Oh, okay. Do you have a quorum?
Well, we can have public. We're not doing anything really right now. Dr. Edmonds is absent. Mr. Meeks is out sick. Councilman Moody.
Here.
Ms. Simmons.
Here.
Dr. Whitaker.
Here.
And Mayor Wright will be late.
There's Paige.
Oh,
Sure, we
great.
have a quorum.
Thank you. Mr. Rowe.
Thank you. If the technology works, we have Sherry on the screen. And this is Sherry, can you hear us? This is an update. The General Assembly starts tomorrow. Sherry's been up there since Saturday. She's going to give us a briefing. Can you hear us, Sherry? Can you see us?
I see you. Can you see me?
We can see you. Tell us what's going on. Tell us what's going on.
Good evening, Vice Mayor Simmons, members of council, Mr. Rowe and staff. In the chilly city of Richmond, Virginia, broadcasting to you. As you probably all know, the General Assembly kicks off tomorrow, the 14th of January, with this 46-day session. This is the budget tweaking, so to speak, session where we're going back to make amendments to the 2016-2015 pieces of the budget. This session is going to be a little different from the ones that we've had in the past, being that both chambers of the legislature are controlled by the Republicans, and we have a Democratic administration. So we're not expecting to get a lot of headway up here on some issues. It's also going into an election year where you've got all the 100 members of the House of Delegates are going up for re-election in November. So there's going to be a lot of campaign brochures types of bills that are going to be coming out. We don't anticipate anything significant to happen with any tax increases as well, being that this is an election year that we're going into. The city's legislative package, the request that the city has made, we have 3 files of legislation. The legislation is being carried by Senator Lucas, Senator Locke, and also Delegate James. All of the legislation hasn't come down yet. There's still filing bills. Bills are still being put into the hopper, so to speak. At this moment, about 1,300 bills have already been dropped. I'm going through those bills and sorting out bills that I think may have some impact to the city of Portsmouth. I probably have already flagged over 400 bills that I'm sending out and have sent out to my contacts in the various departments in the cities to get the potential impact, negative or positive, to the city, so that I can relay that information back to our delegation members. As a matter of fact, we've got one bill that's supposed to come up tomorrow afternoon in a committee meeting dealing with probable cause. And it looks like we might have run into a little bit of trouble with that because I'm told that the state police are having some issues with it. So I'm trying to see if I can get that bill held over till we can work out whatever, if we can work out whatever their concerns are. Today, I think one of the big things that happened today was that the governor made an announcement, and you may have already heard about it. If not, it was a big transportation announcement, reforms that was made about 2:30 this afternoon. And we're still kind of sorting through the whole thing, but it was bipartisan, done in conjunction with the chairman of House Appropriations, Mr. Delegate Jones, and the chairs of the chair and co-chair. Broadcasting. Sorry, it's one of my colleagues trying to get to the room. So I was saying, in conjunction with the co-chairs of the Senate Finance Committee, And really quickly, what this is doing, if you don't mind if I just read a little bit to you. Give me a moment, I'm trying to pull it up here. The bipartisan legislative package just focuses on the following areas: reforming the PPTA process, commonly referred to as the P3 program, replacing the old transportation funding formula with a new system that will better meet transportation needs and improve reliability and transparency to promote HB2 implementation. Is focusing on resources on fixing aging bridges and pavement, improving oversight of project spending by creating a more independent Commonwealth Transportation Board, by establishing that the governor can only terminate CTB members for cause, and providing stability in the funding stream for transit capital projects. So that's just a quick overview. I was kind of trying to read through it before we started speaking just now, and I'm somewhat encouraged by some of the changes. It looks like they're trying to change the old formula for distributing money, which might be helpful to us, prayerfully, with our Churchton Bridge project and other projects that we have coming up in the city. Some important dates for you to remember is, of course, tomorrow is when we begin the session. Crossover, which is when the bills go from the House bills go to the Senate and the Senate bills go to the House, should take place around the 11th of February. That Sunday, the 8th of February, is when the budget amendments, the money committees meet and they discuss their amendments to the budget. The governor has made his proposals, and local governments have pretty much been saved through his proposals, all except the $30 million that we're returning in state aid to the Commonwealth, as is commonly known up here. K-12 hasn't been touched yet. We're hoping that they'll continue not to touch it. So we'll know what the money committees are doing on the 8th of February, and then the actual amendments will come out by noon on the 10th of February. On VML and VACO Day, they've split it into 2 days this year. VML Day is going to be on the 28th of January, which is a Wednesday. And then VACO is going to have theirs on the 5th of February. Session is scheduled to end at this time on the 28th of February, with a reconvened session for the veto session being on the 15th of April. So those are a few of the important dates. BML VACO, we had a powwow today, this afternoon, with the liaisons, which is why a majority of us was not at the press conference for the transportation announcement. There's a few budget amendments that we're working with them on. One of them is to try to restore that $30 million in aid to the Commonwealth. The thought is that even though we're going to ask for the budget amendments, we probably won't get them this year, and that next year is going to be the big fight on the budget when the governor actually puts in his budget. And so we're trying to hold our powder dry for the most part until then. That's about the short and the long of it. If you got any questions for me, have I missed anything that you'd like to know about?
Sherry, this is Sean. Can you tell council about what we picked up late yesterday afternoon about the reduction in funding for the Sports Hall of Fame, and what that cut is and where is it?
Yeah, I'll try to talk to that. I don't have the exact figures in front of me, but in the governor's budget, under tourism is where the money was coming down for the Sports Hall of Fame. That, I think it was $500,000, up to $500,000 they were able to get. That's been cut down to, I want to say, $250,000, maybe half of that, to begin, I believe, in FY15 and 16, if I've got that correct. Is Carol in the room? I can't tell.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So that was part of what the budget, when they were scrubbing the budget, that's part of what the governor came up with in trying to balance the budget. There's about $67 million that, after they finished scrubbing the budget, that they came up with a surplus, what they call surplus, is sitting out there. That was the money that we were aiming at to try to get the $30 million in aid to local government, aid to the state rather, from local governments restored. That's the pot we're looking at going after. Whether or not we'll be able to get it, we don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what happens up here budgetary wise, between what the money committees come up with compared to what the governor came up with.
Do you all have questions of Sherry?
Sherry, this is Elizabeth. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
The VML day they've changed the concept and the timing a little bit. Can you talk about what that's going to be now? It's off-site. It's not at the General Assembly, and it's somewhere else. And I was a little confused.
Under the new administration for VML, they decided to split that day into two. So VACO will have theirs and VML will do theirs. Instead of it being at the
Marriott.
At the Marriott, where they usually had it, what they're going to do is it starts later in the day, when they will be meeting after you come down to the General Assembly that evening over at the Library of Virginia, right across the street, if I remember correctly. And I think that was done because there was some thought that there are some areas that VML covers that VACO doesn't cover, and vice versa. So they kind of want to separate it out so that their members could get the attention that they needed for their legislation and budget.
So the idea is we come up for the day, we talk to our respective people, and then there's a reception late in the day. Is that basically it?
And we go around, we speak with our delegation members that we can catch, talk about our legislative package, talk about our concerns that we may have, to try to encourage them to assist us. The Virginia Local Government Managers Association is going to host a break room for you guys when you come up. So that, and I'll give you that information a little bit later. Between 1:30 and 3:30, while you're at the General Assembly building, there's going to be a room here where we'll have coffee and light refreshments. So you can also stop in here while you're here as well. Sometimes when you come up here between like 1:30 and 3:30, they may still be in session, they may not be, but if they're in session, it gives you a place to go to rest and maybe just congregate for a little while until you can get to your various legislators, our various legislators.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Be safe and be warm.
Thank you. It's supposed to snow.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Thanks, Sherry.
One other thing I wanted to mention, in our legislative package, the Hampton Roads Transportation Accountability Commission, we did ask to have a request in to allow for a backup, so to speak, an alternative elected official from council or board of supervisors to be able to be present in the absence of the chief elected official. So that bill has been submitted, and that was also included in the packages of several of the other localities in our region. So I'm hearing that there's supposed to be another omnibus bill coming out dealing with tweaking the HR TAC, Hampton Roads Transportation Accountability legislation that Delegate Jones might be sponsoring. We haven't seen anything actually hit yet, but we're watching out for that. So we'll see. If that happens, our bill might get rolled into their bill, his bill.
Thank you, Sherry.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry.
Nice seeing you guys.
Nice seeing you.
Isn't she great?
Yeah, she is.
All right. Well, that's a good lead-in to the next topic, which is a briefing on HR TAC. They met this past week, and this is a big deal. This is an agency that gets in $200 million a year to assist in solving the transportation problems of the region. And they had a very difficult time getting a quorum, and that's why that bill is important. And Bob's going to bring you up to date on where this is and underline the importance of having legislation that would amend the current state law to allow for one of you all to be an alternate to the mayor at these meetings. Bob?
We're over here.
Thank you, John. Good evening, Vice Mayor, members of council. I'll give you a relatively quick briefing on the HR TAC. This, for some of you, parts of it will be repetitive of a previous briefing, but this is an organization that has continued to evolve as time goes on. We'll just start off here with a little bit of background just for a reminder. House Bill 2313 back in 2013 is when the General Assembly started to address the state's shortfall in funding for transportation. You may recall from earlier briefings back then, the state was getting to the point where funding for new road projects was running out, and they're about to start dipping into maintenance money for doing any road projects. So back in 2013, the General Assembly addressed that issue with that bill, created a number of taxing mechanisms to raise revenues statewide. And in addition to that, it created this Hampton Roads Transportation Fund. The Hampton Roads Transportation Fund is a dedicated source of funding that comes primarily from fuels tax, wholesale fuels tax, and from dedicated retail sales tax. And at the time that went into place, the estimates, and these continue to kind of shift around, but as we've noted in here, the estimates were about $200 million annually coming from that fund, which would be generated and controlled within the Hampton Roads region and primarily designed to deal with large-scale transportation projects. Mega projects was a term that was used at the time, but fairly large-scale projects. And at the time also, one of the issues was trying to take that money and leverage it with other federal and state funds to try to get a lot more done. And as you, again, may be aware, the funding came with the opportunity for the manager of the fund, which originally was the HRTPO, but now the HR TAC, to actually be able to go out and to levy, institute tolls, all sorts of funding mechanisms, try to bring these projects about. So again, in 2013, the HRTPO was the recipient, the controller of the funds. They started the original project planning. Of course, they have been engaged for many years in transportation planning for the region, and so it was originally set up to go through them. But there was a number of issues, as you recall, came up. They didn't have bonding authority, had a lot of limitations, a lot of dispute, discussion, and ultimately the General Assembly back in 2014 with House Bill 1253 created the Hampton Roads Transportation Accounting Official, the HR TAC. And just very quickly, this is a map. It just shows the member localities in HR TAC. This was another one of those issues that was kind of debated back and forth, who was in, who was out. When they went to establish the taxing parameters, there were certain localities that weren't going to be as their recipients, or they considered of some of the benefits of that. Ultimately, these are the 14 member localities that were put under the umbrella of HR TAC. And once again, and I'm not going to try to explain that voting process this time around, but I'll just say that the voting members that we have up here, you have 14 members. You have the chief elected official. This goes back to what Sherry was just talking about. The chief elected official from each locality will be the mayor or the chair of the board of supervisors from each of the member cities and localities. We have 3 state delegates that are on there, and as we've noted on here, they must reside within this region. They are, on the House side, they're appointed by the Speaker of the House. We have 2 state senators on here. They are also required to reside within the localities within the HR TAC region. And they're appointed by the Senate Committee on Rules.
Bob, if I may, it's important to note that Senator Louise Lucas is one of the senators, and Delegate Johnny Joanno. And so there are actually 3 people on that board from Portsmouth, counting the mayor.
In addition to the voting members, the HR TAC has 4 designated non-voting members. You have a member of the Commonwealth Transportation Board who also must reside within the region. You have the director of the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation, or their designee. They're non-voting. You have the Commissioner of Highways, or their designee, who basically represents VDOT at these meetings, and the Executive Director of the Port Authority. So they're non-voting. They're technical support, process support to the HR TAC members as they go through their process. Following what Sherry was saying, there are 2 bills we're aware of that have been submitted to the General Assembly this year to try to change that provision in which only the chief elected officer can vote on behalf of the community. Both of these bills are basically the same, and they would allow the mayor or the chair of the board of supervisors to select someone else in council to represent them on HR TAC in case they can't be there. And following up on what John mentioned, we did have the last meeting, they had difficulty at the last meeting getting a quorum so they could take action on some of the items they had before them. Now, as I mentioned, just kind of stepping back for a second, we'll go back to the HRTPO. You know, the Transportation Planning Organization is a mandated agency by federal law. They have to include major projects in the regional transportation plan in order to be eligible for federal funding. And so basically all of these projects that the HR TAC is wanting to be involved in are going to have to still go through the HRTPO planning process. So back in September, there were 8 HR TAC projects that were rolled into the HRTPO 2034 long-range plan. The estimated cost of these projects, these are their 8 primary projects, is $8.5 billion. You can see we're not talking small projects here.
And it's important to note that 20 years only gives you 5.5. So still there's a funding gap for these 8 projects.
And in the HRTPO planning process, they're required by federal law when they develop their long-range plan to be referred to as fiscally constrained. There has to be some reasonable way to fund the project. You can't just have a wish list. In the old days, they just have a wish list. You have this giant, kind of like a CIP, giant long wish list of things that you know you can never get to. Those days are over. And so they had to identify other places where the funds might come from to pay for the additional funding, which would include other federal funds, additional revenues that are coming from that House Bill 2313, because it does generate additional funds that come to the region, other state funds, and again, the potential for using tolls in some of these projects, which will be an issue as this goes forward. And here's what the HRTPO 2034 long-range map looks like. You can see the projects in here. And we move into the discussion on the HR TAC, you'll see quite a similarity here. Just 64 on what's referred to as 64 on the peninsula, and you can see there's 3 segments that are shown up here. This is 664 from the interchange in Hampton coming down to Bowers Hill. This is 64 between the I-464 over the high-rise bridge coming into Bowers Hill. This is referred to here as the 460-5813 connector with 2 flyovers, one at the SIPSA landfill, one at the Chesapeake Executive Airport. And there's also the I-264-64 interchange. I think anybody who's driven through there recognizes that's a pretty big project. So that's the projects that make up that $8.5 billion worth of potential projects under the HRTPO long-range transportation plan. So where is HR TAC when it comes to all those projects? And they've got basically a few things underway. The first one, which was actually endorsed and adopted when the funds were being controlled by the HRTPO, is the I-64 Peninsula widening, which segment 1 runs from where the interstate necks down at Jefferson Avenue, where it goes down to 2 lanes there and generates all the jam up all the way down to the Lee Hall exit. That's segment 1. That project is funded. VDOT bids closed yesterday, and so it's expected that this project's actually headed towards construction in the relatively near future. I think they're looking at, I believe, a 2017 completion date for that segment. Then there's 2 more segments beyond that they'll get to, but from the HR TAC process, and there's $44 million of HR TAC money in that segment there. Then on that I-64-264 project, there's funding that's been approved for preliminary engineering for right-of-way acquisition. And the third crossing, we'll take a look at these on a map in a second, but there's funding in there for the beginning of the environmental work, as there is on the I-64 widening the high-rise bridge replacement project for environmental and preliminary engineering. So if you look at the HR TAC map, again, you'll see the 3 segments I was speaking of. Kind of see the distance where it goes up. If you're familiar with Route 199, as you're riding along 64, that last segment connects to 2 ends of 199. So the western part of the project past Williamsburg on that 190, that's the extent of what HR TAC has in its program. So those are the peninsula projects, includes some bridge projects, a little bit of interchange work, but that's again from the HR TAC process. That's what they're looking at funding for the 64 peninsula projects. Third Crossing, I think we're all pretty familiar with Third Crossing. Again, you see the 664 widening from the 64 interchange in Hampton all the way down to Bowers Hill. You'll see the Patriots Crossing connector right there. Craney Island connector, which obviously is important to us, coming down. That's a port authority or a port expansion related expense to do that segment. That's all included in the HR TAC process. Again, these are not funded projects for construction yet. These are what projects they're working on. And then the third one is the 64 widening through the new high-rise bridge and the 264 interchange project. So there's a lot of work still to be done on these. Obviously, the biggest one is figuring out how to pay for everything. That's going to be an issue. They have not gotten to the point of figuring out what's the way to fund all of these. Issues with tolls are obviously going to come up. High-rise bridge project in particular, I think we'll be seeing a discussion on tolls or no tolls. And again, that's just part of the process they're involved in. Last couple of items I just want to mention as far as things going on with HR TAC. You remember when we were discussing this the last time, they were debating should they have their own executive director or should they share an executive director with the TPO or should they share an executive director with the TPO and the HRPDC. Ultimately, with strong General Assembly member advice, we'll put it, they chose to have an executive director that serves solely for the HRTPO, and they are currently in their search to hire that person. And in their budgeting this year, they budgeted for that position. They'll obviously have the potential for some additional administrative costs for the HR TAC when they go to any additional staffing they determine they might need.
What they budget for that position?
For the position? Mm-hmm. I can't remember exactly what they budgeted for the position.
We'll get that.
We'll have to get the number for you.
Well, and that begs another question. What is the operating budget? Obviously, executive director is going to have people working for them, which is going to beget more bureaucracy. So out of that $200 million that's going to be raised per year, what percentage of that is going to go into operating?
Personnel.
And there will be, exactly. They've got, right now they're using HRTPO staff. They may continue to do that. They have an MOU for that. They may decide they need their own dedicated staff. I wouldn't be surprised if that's what they basically said they're waiting for is to get the executive director in there and then find out what the executive director says they need to run the HR TAC operations.
How many people know want their own staff?
Yeah. And they're also sharing office space in the regional building. They may need additional space. All those questions have not been answered, but they are definitely a higher amount of administrative costs as this thing evolves. And the last thing is there's an opinion that they're waiting for back, and I don't know if John wants to speak to this, but they're waiting for an attorney on conflict of interest. If they get their money, they want to put it in a bank. There have been some recent news stories about certain elected officials who might be on bank boards and affiliations with banks or construction companies, and so there's concern about since the way the legislation is written, the way the mayors and chairs have to be the voting member. If they have a conflict, what does that do? Because obviously you could have a locality that doesn't have a vote. And that's really one of the questions that comes in there. If it's determined that they have a conflict, they have no backup. They can't send someone else in to vote for them. It's just so they're waiting for that. At the February HR TAC meeting, they're expecting to get a briefing on that Attorney General opinion as to what that means. So that's obviously sort of a complicating factor as they work through the process of dealing with the money and then determining whether or not their membership has any conflicts that might, again, prevent them from being able to participate in the process. And so keep tuned, for that. And with that, be glad to answer any questions you might have. Like I said, it is an ongoing process. As you hear with Sherry, I guess the General Assembly is still taking a look at tweaking some of these things, some of these questions that are up there. We do know from before that the way the membership was structured, that Delegate Jones was very insistent on the voting membership. So it'll be interesting to see if anything's changed, if he softened his position on any of that since last year. But that was really a product that was driven by the legislation.
Since it is obviously a public agency, is there a budget that's been published and voted on?
There is a budget. we can get you that. There's a budget.
And we'll get that to you.
You said $200 million. That's what they're looking to raise?
Well, based on the estimates, and it fluctuates. In fact, it starts a little lower and then accelerates over time.
Per year. Yeah.
But they're estimating per year. It started off a little bit lower than that, but they expect over time to be generating, on average, about $200 million a year of dedicated funds. And that money can either be used.
Where is the funding coming from?
It comes from fuel tax and it comes from retail tax. There's a
For the region, within the footprint.
within the regional footprint. Exactly.
Now, they also have tolling authority. Have they discussed tolls with y'all?
They have. In fact, what transpired at the last meeting was the cooperation agreement between HR TAC and VDOT, particularly as it relates to the construction projects. And several of the whereases mentioned tolls. And you would be glad to know that the position of the state General Assembly members from Portsmouth was anti-tolls. But there are no projects that are under construction now that are tolled.
But at the same time, we all know the weight of our people are very low, right? I mean, because the population is
The weighted voting.
Was the
your
weighted,
Exactly.
weighted
weighted
voting.
vote.
Yeah.
It's a very arcane method.
If Virginia
it's a
Beach wants to-
supermajority, and it's a double supermajority. A supermajority of everybody voting plus that vote's got to represent 2/3 of the population in the region.
Right.
So
That could be Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, and Norfolk, correct?
we could be with a very small voice.
Do you
And this
feel-
is a big deal, but I mean, how many times have goods and services coming to Portsmouth got stuck going to the peninsula because of the bottleneck at 664? Think about the port. 50% of the port facilities are in Portsmouth. When Craney Island comes on, 3/5 of the port is going to be in Portsmouth.
All right, where did the other board members on the tolling piece? You said we were against it.
There was not much discussion at all. The objections were raised by both Louise and by Johnny, and they were made it very clear that they're not for tolls.
But you weren't discussing specific projects.
Right,
That
I
was
think where
just
they
a
were getting, we're trying to
conceptual
Exactly.
conversation.
The funding question is still to come, and that was in fact one of the questions that was being raised is if
'Cause these
if the funding
projects
turns up to be
are-
short, does that mean we're going to default to a toll?
I mean, these projects are half a billion dollars and on up. Some of them.
They're big.
I mean, that high-rise bridge is going to be, that's going to be $200 million a year and cover that. They're going to have to toll.
Well, as I mentioned, that list of
Well,
projects was $8.5 billion.
There's
right there.
another issue, and that's the bonding capacity of this. They could take a portion or all of that 200 and apply that as debt service and amplify the amount of money. The question is who's going to buy the bonds, and so all that's got to be worked out. And they're just at the start, at the front end of that.
How do you feel about, are the tolls going to come?
I would bet that there are going to be projects, unfortunately, that will have tolls, and they'll probably impact Portsmouth. I'd like to see a portion of this money write down the tolls on the downtown and the midtown tunnel. I think we need to work hard on that. We'll have a report from Brandon that we're doing another toll impact analysis now that a whole year's gone by, and we want to know the impact looking back over the past year of the tolls on the citizens of Portsmouth. And so I think our voice should be loud that take a portion of this money and write down the tolls if possible. And that's good news to hear that there's going to be a look at the P3, the Public-Private Transportation Act. We were a victim of that.
Right.
We were a victim.
I thought it had been determined, though, that the revenue raised by HR tax through the gasoline tax, sales tax, could only be used for new projects. That was the justification for not using any of that money on the current construction in the downtown, midtown tunnel.
You're right, but that's, over the next 20 years, there'll be 20 sessions of the General Assembly, and we need to work, just like we're doing with this session, the 2015 session, to put legislation in to get things done. It's not working to have no alternate. Kenny had to leave because his mother was in the hospital, seriously ill. And when he left, they didn't have a quorum, and he didn't need to be at that meeting. He needed to be with his family. And so they're scrambling around trying to get another voting member. And that member comes rushing in the door, and it makes quorum. That's not how you do business with something this important for this region and this city. That's not how you do that business.
If I could just add one last thing, you may have noticed or been thinking to yourself, there's still a missing project up there, and the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel is not in that. But don't assume over the next 20 years that project's going to be left like it is.
I don't see how they can do Patriots Crossing. It's a competing crossing, and we're going to pay more for that because we're going to pay all the competing revenue that they lose.
I think that would be the argument that ERC would put first on the table.
Just go ahead and cut it. When the toll's paid in 58 years, we'll bring it back.
We'll keep you apprised. Okay, thank you. We have a very short briefing on the status of the weed ordinance. As you know, we're trying to get the best model that will work for the cities. You get a lot of complaints about weeds and grass. We get a lot of complaints. And you told us to have a civic engagement process, and we just want to give you a report on where we are in that process. Go ahead, Fred.
Thank you, John. Madam Vice Mayor, gentlemen of council, last year we came to you with a request to review our model for enforcement of the nuisance section dealing with the weeds and the grass. At that time, you asked us to go back with and conduct a very strong civic engagement, civic input into the existing program we have and what we were proposing. We've been using the Facebook, the Twitter, the email blast, surveys actually in the utility bills, and discussions with the civic leagues face-to-face with myself and then with staff. That input session, I guess you'd say civic input, we ended it pretty much in November, at the end of November, so we could start tallying what we had heard to be bringing back to you. And at the same time, it gave us a very good opportunity to begin looking at a full year, 14 of the actual hard data. How many notices, how many times do we cut, those types of things. So we could pull that part of the information together so you can have an idea of how many there are and how much we're having to spend time and money on to do that. We were only able to start that data review last week, and we're still going through, and there's some interesting things I think coming out of it. But we needed more time to get that moving, so we wanted to let you know that we have not forgotten you. We're still working on it, and we would be coming back within the next 30 to 45 days with a full report. The final point is we have not heard of any changes being proposed at the General Assembly, but this also gives us a chance to make certain that what we're bringing back to you would be in compliance not only with the current, but if there are future changes in state code. And we wanted to make certain we brought you a complete package, not one that we say, oops, we've got to go back 2 weeks later and make a change because of maybe a General Assembly modification.
Thanks, Fred. Any questions? Well, this is a segue to tolls, from weeds to tolls. As you know, we had Dr. Cook, Jim Cook, President Emeritus of Old Dominion University, do a study of the impact. That study was done last year in time for presentation to the General Assembly.
Thanks, John. And good evening. Madam Vice Mayor, members of council, just very briefly, we are going to sit down with Dr. Cook tomorrow and talk about updating his analysis. You'll recall that his analysis looked at a number of things, primarily the economy in Portsmouth compared to the economy in the region, the specifics of personal income in Portsmouth compared to personal income in the region, and employment, and then concluded that tolls would have a disparate impact on Portsmouth, and we're going to take a revisit that, look at it a year out, get some updated traffic data, and the plan is to sort of see where we are 1 year after his initial conclusion. So we're going to do that tomorrow. He provided for us today an additional piece of information that may be relevant. He's done an analysis for the Hampton Roads Community Foundation on a number of municipal services across Virginia, and looked at where there are opportunities for mergers and consolidations, and then looked specifically at what the cost is per capita for Portsmouth to provide those services. And we just got it today, so we haven't really done a lot of deep analysis of it. But when we have his ear tomorrow, we're going to take the opportunity to see what more we can get out of that study. So that's our plan for tomorrow.
On that comparison, now that we have, I guess, a year under our belt, that's going to include, obviously, meal tax, lodging tax, admission tax, all the pertinent taxes, and hopefully based on a same-store comparison.
Right.
And the reason why I mentioned that, because we've all of us have seen some of our restaurant owners and business owners on TV saying that in their estimation it has hurt business. Obviously, if their business is hurt, then our revenues are hurt due to those taxes.
We'll look at that information as well. It depends on their market, and but for the most part, we expect that on the whole they have been hurt by the tolls.
Okay. So when will we have that comparison?
Well, we haven't talked to him about the timetable for producing the report. He was very quick last year at turning that around. We asked him. We engaged him in December and said we need this before the General Assembly session last year, and if you'll remember, he got it to us first week of January. So he'll have a little more time this time, but I think he can get us something in probably 30 to 60 days at the most.
Also, if it's an impact on the toll increase, his opinion on that.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Because the new pricing.
And in addition to that, Bill, the impact on citizens who have to commute, and what impact that might be having on employment trends.
We'll have a follow-up for you shortly.
Okay. Okay. Good. That, Madam Vice Mayor, is what we have. We have your council liaison reports. And we need
I have one question.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Last night, y'all discussed appropriations last night after I left. How is that working as far as with the school board? I mean, are we communicating with them, getting along with Mr. Steele and all that?
Yes, to my knowledge. Yes.
Yeah, they know that it's on for tonight, and we've communicated with them. We've got both of them on as quickly.
Is this helping them to dig down and tighten up on their budget as far as, because we appropriated $3.4 million. How much have we appropriated this year?
When?
This year. Have we already appropriated one time before?
We've in total appropriated over $4.7 million.
4.7, then tonight's another 500.
That's including the amount.
Oh,
of
okay. Is that helping them, getting their stuff, kind of an outline of, so next year?
I haven't heard anything negative from either Pat Fisher and her team were meeting. We had scheduled very frequent meetings, and we're now waiting for the new school superintendent to come on board. At none of the meetings that we had did we have any negative impact or comments from either Pat or from Chris.
Okay, so everything's working good with Chris. All right.
Now, let me, when you say you haven't heard any negative, what are you basing that on?
Just what I said. I hadn't heard anything negative. They didn't come. We had.
Are you saying verbally, or you haven't had any written communication?
Neither, either orally or in writing.
So you haven't received any notification from council in regards to that issue?
From council,
Right.
the city council?
Right.
That's right.
From city attorney?
From the city attorney?
Right.
No.
So Wilson, have you received any notification from council regarding the funding issue and the reappropriation of funds to?
Last spring, we exchanged a series of letters. I shared them with City Council, but I haven't heard anything from Mr. Meekin since that exchange of correspondence, and I think that was in the spring and early summer.
Because those weren't positive communications.
Well, we disagreed on his interpretation, my interpretation of the code, but lawyers often disagree.
Well, but there was a particular reason why the issue that was being addressed in your communications, there was a particular reason why that was being raised, and it wasn't because of a positive impact on the school board.
Well, that wasn't, it wasn't, the reason for the questioning wasn't expressed in the letters. So I was just answering the questions that he posed in his correspondence.
My question wasn't that. My question is basically appropriations going to stay in place because it's going to help us figure out where they need to spend their money. So that's what he's talking about. Don't have nothing to do with my question. My question is appropriations is going to stay in place because it's going to make sure we allocate the money where it needs to go. So, all right.
Well, and you have new finance staff.
Correct.
On the school side you're working with now that you didn't have before.
Right. And open lines of communication.
And I don't think that's the role of council though to determine where money needs to go for the school system.
Well, categorized budgeting is what we put in place.
That is exactly the role.
And that's what we're doing.
In fact, we got chastised by the grand jury report for not doing that. So that was one of the recommendations that they put forth.
Well, we know how grand juries work.
I know they have the force of law behind them.
Right.
There was no law that came out of this.
Correct. But by the rule of 4 of here, that's what we put in place.
Do we have any council liaison reports?
No, you have two new planning commission members were at the first meeting. You were there,
Good.
and was Baldwin there?
Bob there.
Yeah. So I was allowed to make a presentation to them about some of the responsibilities and explain to them the two things that we had changed that they sent up to us the last month about. What were the two things we changed last month?
Back taxes.
The back taxes about the property out the Walmart that we're taking the position that if you owe taxes to the city of Portsmouth, you would not be producing projects. We won't be allowing projects to go forward. So, because they had some questions about that, they were given a different answer and didn't understand why we kicked that back. And I will let you know that the federal government is doing the same thing. They now have legislation prohibiting you from contracting with the federal government if you are delinquent in taxes or if you or your company has a felony conviction. So the action we took on that last month was right in line with what the federal government is now doing. So we didn't know it at the time.
Makes sense.
We were smart.
So I explained that to the new commissioners, and they were two new ones were very engaged at the first meeting. So I was pleased with. So I think we made two good choices there.
Yeah, our new EDA folks will begin next week. Any other reports?
I want to bring up one thing about the appointments. The appointments that he's given me, I'm fine with. I I do think as council, we always talking about keeping together in order. The personnel, if you want to take one off, I'm agreeing with, but replacing both of them, having a fresh start, I think we need to revisit that with Kenny before he gets here. If we go into close and we had to come back into open before we go out there and vote, I wish to see Paige to keep one of the personnel spots, just because he's been up there, and that's just my personal opinion. But it's 7 of us and 4 of us said no. That's fine with me.
Well, I thought the mayor's recommendations were good, and it's really no carryover per se on that. Personnel committees, primarily boards and commission appointments that are brought forth to council, and major personnel issues. All of council,
the old council, right,
is involved in those, briefed on those. So I'm all right with the mayor's appointment myself. So speaking for me.
Yeah, I didn't have no problem. I just thought the personnel one, it's a lot of back and forth. I mean, y'all do a couple extra things than we normally just show up as liaisons, but
I don't think the new ones would do the same.
no, I think y'all do great, but I don't know the transition of what has to go on in personnel, because I never played detail.
Really, I mean, I'm pointing the finger at Deborah because she's kind of the glue that transitions through the years, and really there's no. It's really not a hard transition because we're all involved in it, and I say all. I mean, I didn't know what was all involved with the personnel committee. No. I mean, that's kind of why I asked the question.
I'm okay either way. I'm not a big deal. And I know the bishop would do a fine job. The only thing I did question was the housing authority. The majority of people who are in public housing are minorities, and we don't have neither one of the liaisons on the housing authority are minorities. But if you kept the team you had first, which was
me and Bishop did
Meeks
well,
and Edmonds, you would accomplish that, and we wouldn't have any. And we did have some issues with the housing authority this past year that I think but you two helps move out. I just felt like that transition, keeping you two there. I just looked at these things again. We left here last night when we got the whole list.
I think the mayor's recommendations are good.
So, but that's the only one I had a question about was that one, to make sure that way we kept the.
I don't have my list with me. Who did he put there?
He put Meeks and Moody.
Well, I think we can certainly ask him when he comes. I think he'll be here after we eat, before we go in.
I'm good with the mayor's recommendations all around.
Paige, I'm fine. If Paige is fine. I just thought it was more. Y'all did a little bit more.
That's not a big deal with me personally.
I'd like to bring up one more thing that we can talk about again. But this is the mayor's baby, but I'm gonna bring it up just for discussion purposes. When he sent us this, he also had a little sidebar about our Monday work sessions, and some of us said about eliminating our Monday work sessions, and if we need to back up our Tuesday work sessions to begin a little earlier, at 4:30 or so on Tuesday, to eliminate the Monday meetings other than the quarterly meetings that we have with our economic development partners, and try not to tie ourselves up and our staff up on 2 other nights a month.
I'm good with that. If we need the extra time, we could always do it on a special meeting notice. But as a rule, I think starting earlier could accomplish that. But I'd like to hear from the manager on your thoughts.
Our scarcest time, our scarcest resource is not money, it's our time with you. I wasn't aware that was a discussion. We stay busy every night of the week with civic league meetings and et cetera. But the time that we have with you, I treat as very special time because we are looking to get decisions and direction from you guys. And if you're willing to have a special meeting when we need that direction, that's fine. And we don't want to waste your time either. We don't. But the stuff that we bring to you is really important stuff. I mean, just like HR TAC tonight, it's a regional thing, but it's important to Portsmouth.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll go with what the majority agrees to, but just recognize that not all of us work right here on this side of the tunnel, and getting here at 3 o'clock or whatever could prove problematic, particularly for me coming through the downtown and midtown tunnel. So I would be apt to be late at some of those meetings.
I think it would be a more efficient use of the time to cut it back from 4 to 2 and 4 to 2 meetings, and having your earlier sessions before your regular session, and it could be accomplished, I would say 5 o'clock or 5:30, and if we have issues that are require more time than that, if they need to carry over.
So 5 o'clock?
Yeah, 5 or 5:30, whichever. But I do agree, and I don't know the history of how that came to be, why we have 4 meetings a month.
It just kind of evolved over the years.
Mm-hmm.
I think the mayor's point was that I think he's, in his meetings with other mayors, we seem to be the only one that has this many meetings.
Well, I was surprised when I saw it, and I did look at some of the other cities and saw that
Maybe
they
the
didn't
clerk
meet as
shaking her
often.
head. Deborah, tell us the history.
It's a long history.
I mean, have we had these meetings as long as you've been in the clerk's office?
Yes. Well, like Councilman Moody said, they have evolved. It used to be where the Monday meeting before the second Tuesday was primarily just for the adoption of planning items. And that was it, your public hearings, adoption of those items. The second meeting came into focus when we had to have the joint meetings with other boards. And then it evolved into the meeting with the economic development partners. So that kind of got added into it. It eventually became just work sessions because we didn't have enough planning items to warrant having that particular meeting just for that. So, and then of course we have the work session that has always been before the council meeting. The other cities have their work session right prior to
Like
their
we do
council
right now.
meetings. They don't have an additional day just set aside just for work sessions.
Bishop?
We've had moments when there was nothing that would constitute us having a meeting on Monday, and the mayor would say so. It's good to have that affordability if we do need Monday, that the mayor still could do that if we need the Monday.
Well, keep in mind the way council's rules and procedures are written. If there's a need for a meeting, either the manager or 3 members of council can request a meeting. So you still, and the manager could say there's a need for a meeting. So you still have that flexibility if you decided to go away from the Monday meetings.
Well, we'll report this to the mayor when he's here and make that decision at that time.
Does the state code require a certain number of regular council meetings? It doesn't?
And a lot of this history developed when we didn't have the meetings broadcast, the work sessions recorded and broadcast. Now any member of council who can't make a work session can view the work session. They can't participate at the time, but they can. They're really just to receive. It's just to receive information and to ask questions, and they can always ask questions.
Yeah.
And receive the information when they view the tapes of the meetings.
Dr. Whitaker, typically meetings are specified in either the city charter or town charter, which has, because that is adopted by the General Assembly, it has the effect of state law. I mean, if there's a conflict between, and George can tell you this, between the charter and the state code, the charter usually prevails. So that's typically where you find any requirement for the number of meetings is in the charter for the city or the town. But we do need a closed session, though.
I move to go into a closed meeting pursuant to the provisions of Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711 for the following purpose: consultation with legal counsel and briefing by staff pertaining to matters of probable litigation and actual litigation, Watson versus the city, as permitted under subsection A7.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Cherry?
Yes.
Mr. Edmonds?
Yes.
Excuse me. Mr. Meeks?
Yes.
Mr. Moody?
Yes.
Ms. Simmons?
Yes.
Dr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mayor Wright's absent. We are enclosed. Thank you.
We don't need